Networking is just like a fancy corporate term and that's a great way for you to build wealth. It can be really hard to get a professional service job if you don't have. Okay, so in this video, you're gonna hear my personal experience and review of living in San Francisco and New York. Now I know, before you guys troll in the comments, that New York and Los Angeles is probably more comparable, but I didn't live in Los Angeles when I was a baby, so that doesn't count. And if you guys hear echo in the background, I apologize. I don't have my mic and I'm basically just speaking without the microphone right now, so excuse that. If you guys are new to our channel, we help millennials build wealth so they can live life on their terms. So for this video, a lot of what I'm going to talk about is going to be centered around how you can be successful in your career so you can be successful, you know, building wealth and retiring early. So if that's something that you're interested in, then definitely stay around until the end. Okay, so let's first start off with the first topic that I feel like most people are going to care about next to the second, and that is going to be jobs. So starting off with San Francisco, the average income in San Francisco is over 6 figures. So according to this website that I actually Googled, I found out that you are beneath like the means if you're making under $84,000, which is pretty crazy. Like basically if you make under $84,000, you're poor. And I thought that was really interesting because I don't know a lot of people that make that much outside their role, especially if they're in an entry-level position. So the pros with jobs over here is that you are in the center of the tech bubble. So it's big tech everywhere. You have Google, Facebook, Instagram, which is part of Facebook, Salesforce, all have their hubs in San Francisco. So when you're part of a big tech company, which is where my background is, you have a lot of equity, especially if you come in right when they go IPO, and that helps you have a stable income. So you're looking at, you know, at the bare minimum, maybe $114,000 per year, and that's not including the equity and also the bonus that you get. Now, if you guys are not familiar with equity, basically how it works is when you've been at a company for 4 years, every year you're given a set amount of shares, and you can either sell those shares or you can reinvest it to another portfolio. You can also invest into your ESPP. If you guys are interested on ESPP and my personal experience, I have a video over here that you guys can check out, and it's basically my experience of why I personally don't believe in an ESPP, but you can also invest in a lot of shares, and that's a great way for you to build wealth early on. Another thing that you can do is you can find a early stage startup, and I would make sure you do your homework because there's a lot of crappy startups out there, and from there, if your startup is really successful, then you're basically hitting the jackpot, because once they go IPO, then you're going to be really wealthy. So a lot of people that I know like came in right before Slack boomed off. I have some friends that, you know, jumped from companies and got into Zoom like right before the pandemic, so they're pretty much set as well. And stock's really great. I think it's something that people definitely overlook when they're looking at their offer letter because it's not cash value at that exact moment, so a lot of people don't think it's actually a lot of money, but actually the shares are really a great way for how I was able to build my wealth under 30, so I would definitely look at that as well. So some of the cons of finding a job in San Francisco are there is only tech. So to be able to find a good paying job here, you either need to be a founder of a startup that ends up doing well, or you need to be a software engineer, a programmer, a UX UI designer, a project manager. And if you don't have any of those actual skills, then you can find a job in recruiting or sales or human resources. I know a lot of people want to get into marketing as well if they feel like they don't have what it takes to be in sales. The problem is that most of these companies, especially if they're small, usually their marketing team is made up of one person, and if you have a larger company, then it's typically 5 people at the max is what I've seen, and there's a lot of people internally that are going after that marketing role, so it's going to be really hard for you to land a job over there. Plus, when you think about it, marketing doesn't really pay as well as other jobs like sales if you're able to get into that. But if you are able to do sales, there's a lot of software sales roles here that you can get into, aka SaaS, software as a service, and that's a great way to make money, especially if you are in the enterprise role. Now, if none of that really interests you, it's going to be really hard for you to find alternative roles here. I'll put a screen over here where you guys can see other professions that people do in San Francisco. Of course, you can go into your typical firms like EY, Deloitte, and PwC. They also have locations here, but a lot of those big firms are moving out to go to Texas these days to save money on rent. So it's not going to be that big of a thing here. So I highly suggest you look into tech if you do want to find a good role here. All right, so now let's talk about career in New York City compared to San Francisco. So apparently, according to this report that I just pulled out, you're basically under what you should be making if you're under the 50K mark in New York, which is crazy to me. So yes, basically, like, you need a higher salary in San Francisco than you do in New York. Now, the thing with New York is it is really competitive to get a professional job. Like, if you want a job outside of the corporate world, then I can't speak to that. But this is my opinion of getting a job in the corporate world. So that's working at a big firm, working in big tech, all those type of professional services. The reason why is because you have a lot of the Ivy League close by. You got Harvard, you got Yale, you got Columbia, Cornell, UPenn, all of those old money universities, okay? In San Francisco, you only got to worry about like Stanford and maybe Berkeley. That's about it. So basically, you're competing with every Ivy League trust fund whose parents probably work at the firm or have a relationship with someone at the firm or is sleeping with someone at the firm. Either way, like, everyone is connected through like generations of being rich in the city. So it can be really hard to get a professional service job if you don't have connections. Now, I will say that that goes for everything in life. If you want to get a job in fashion or something in the creative space, like maybe you want to become a Instagram influencer, or maybe you want to go into filmmaking, you need to have connections of some way in the industry, and that also goes in San Francisco. That would apply over there. So the great thing about living in New York is that it's definitely more of a social environment. So it's really easy to go out to a party when we had parties, or like go out to the park, I guess, whatever, and meet people that are in different industries if you're looking to jump ship and go to another industry. If you go to a house party, for instance, in San Francisco, if there are any, then you're probably meeting someone else that already works in tech. So it's kind of hard to like jump ship. So for example, like, let's say you're in sales and you really want to get into UX design, then it would be really easy for you to meet someone else in New York. No, that's not a great example. Let's say you're in a professional service role, but maybe you want to get into Broadway. It would be easier for you to meet someone in New York that is in Broadway than it would be in San Francisco. That's also says anything about fashion, because you have different industries that have their home base in New York. So it's easier for you to make a transition. It's also easier for you in New York to tap into a creative outlet or creative space outside of your 9-to-5 professional job at night, just because there is more of a creative, I guess, like, there's more of a creative circle in New York than there is in San Francisco. And it's definitely not uncommon for someone to like have a day job and then at night they're working on their side hustle or their passion project, because everyone in New York is into like hustling and getting into their next step that they need in their role. Now, there's also the cons of that because you're constantly working, you're expected to work really long hours. I know some people that work a minimum of 60 hours a week, and on the weekends they're working really late into the night. And a lot of these jobs, when you're working at a big firm, you're probably expected to be in probably around 7 or 8 before your boss is there, and you don't leave the office until 9 or 10. Now, that was before the pandemic. I don't know how things are right now. That's not happening, but I do know that in New York, you definitely work longer hours, whereas in San Francisco, everyone's a little more like chill there and laid back. Like, people literally do the bare minimum until they have to be told to do any hard work. And I know this from experience being in the employee side and also being on the management side. People in San Francisco are really lazy, and if you ask someone to work harder, they'll get really offended and passive aggressive. Like, people in SF will not tell you how they feel. They'll just be really passive aggressive about it. And there's so many other jobs in the Bay Area that if you say something that pisses someone off, then they'll just get another job the next week. So it's not, the like employees are not held accountable because they can easily just jump ship. So I felt like in San Francisco, the employees ran the show, and there wasn't a lot that could be made because there was also the fear of the retention side. So basically, to sum it up, New York will have way more job opportunities in terms of a variety of different types of jobs that you want in different industries. It's also great networking in New York because you're meeting people from all different types of walks of life. And if you want to change industries, you have a better option of finding someone that's already in that space, because at the end of the day, I really do feel like if you want to be successful in a career, you just need to network the crap out of whatever you're doing, which is really annoying. But networking, I like to say, is basically like building relationships, you guys. So networking is just like a fancy corporate term for building relationships. So just building relationships with people, being genuinely interested in their lives. And how you can be genuinely interested in their lives is actually ask questions that you're interested about and listen. And if you want to like read a book on how to improve in that way, I actually read a book when I first started out, is like How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's by Dale Carnegie, I think. So I'll put the clip over here and you guys can check that out. But it's definitely a great way to learn how to communicate with people, how to find out what other people care about, and how to basically win friends and influence people. Literally what it says. Okay, you guys, we are at my last apartment that I lived at in San Francisco before I moved to New York. Here it is. Oh my god, it's so weird being back here. You have no idea. So let me explain how housing compares in New York. Let me grab out my notes. First, let's lock the keys. Okay, so let's talk, you guys. So there's going to be limited housing in San Francisco just because, as you guys can see, the buildings have to be a certain height. They can't be more than, I would say, more than 4 floors. I guess if you count the first floor as a floor, then it's a floor, because of earthquakes that happen in San Francisco. So if they're taller than that area, then it's going to be an earthquake issue. So a lot of the housing in San Francisco is actually not as tall. And so because of that, okay, excuse me, I'm vlogging. Because of that, there isn't a lot of options. So you'll notice that a lot of these are like maybe like 1 or 2 bedrooms, but a lot of people will actually convert them inside. So, but the thing is like you have a lot of options. Like you could get an Edwardian building like that, or you could find something a little more chill. You could find like a house over by Sunset, or you can find a modern apartment, you know, closer to the financial district. But this is typically what you're going to get in the area. Everyone is basically converting their apartments, or they used to. I don't know what they're doing these days. But this is so wild. Like, that girl over there is literally living in my old bedroom. I don't know if you guys can see. I think she actually still has my old sheets or my old curtains. That is so wild. I will say though, you do get more space for what you pay for. So even though the rent prices are fairly much the same in both cities, you will get more space here, and you're actually going to get like parking spots like down there if you want. But for the most part, I think San Francisco gives you more space for what you pay for, and they're equally the same price. If not, one's like a little more than the other. I really don't think so. I think really they're both pretty much the same. I actually paid less when I lived in San Francisco. One, because I thought I was making less, and also because I was the one that house hacked. So this is the apartment that I actually house hacked. That one bedroom up there was a one bedroom that I converted into 3 rooms, but it was advertised on Craigslist as a 2 bedroom. So, but basically I lived in the living room, which is that window over there. I might actually still be on here. Dead ass I am.
So, please state your name after the tone, and Google Voice will try to connect you.
Joy. It's so weird. Okay, sorry. Okay, you guys, we're at my friend Supriya's apartment. It's actually more like a house. So this is what you guys can get if you're looking for more of a house layout in San Francisco. This is in the neighborhood of Potrero Hill, I believe. That's what it's called. And the total rent is around $5,100 for 3 bedrooms. So as you guys can see, there's a lot of space. There's a lot of light, and I'm wearing a mask because we're being safe for COVID. But going over here, her bedroom's over here, and then right over here is like the office where you can work, and there's a lot of light. So there's a lot of space here. It's really great for pandemic living. If you guys are looking for a place, they're renting this out. And also they're selling their West Elm couch if anyone wants it. It's this guy over here. So I see this as like a meditation area. And then also, this is really rare in San Francisco, but they have a giant yard in the back. So that's really cool. Okay, so I'm gonna say this. I really do feel like New York and SF in terms of housing, the housing prices are basically the same. Like, I'm not gonna nickel and dime and be like, oh, New York was $50 cheaper or that sort of thing. But I will go back, like in my earlier clip, I do think that you get more space in San Francisco in terms of the rooms. The rooms are bigger than you would in New York. Also, I noticed in San Francisco, because everyone's like making their makeshift rooms into bedrooms that aren't really rooms, like building fake walls. A lot of places in San Francisco, if you get a roommate, you won't have a living room. Whereas like if you're in New York, you most likely can still convert rooms and still have a living room. So that was like one thing I did notice, is that like San Francisco just doesn't have living rooms, which is definitely weird. But now, because of people leaving the cities and apartments being cheaper or more affordable in the cities, I'm sure you wouldn't have to deal with that. I do think that in New York, because the buildings are a bigger variety of old and new, a lot of buildings in New York do have parking. There's not a lot of parking in San Francisco, whereas in New York there is a lot of parking. My last apartment, I did have a parking garage that I could park my car in for a, reasonable amount of $700 a month. But you could afford it. Okay, so let's talk about people. I will say that people in San Francisco are like super closed off, and here's why. So in San Francisco, you're getting a lot of like the nerdy, geeky people, no offense to anyone, I live there, that were like, super smart and like into like calculus and algebra when they were in high school. So they weren't that cool in high school or college, and then when they finally like got their big tech job at Google or Facebook, suddenly now they have the status symbol because they can say, I am a senior programmer number 3 team lead at Google, and apparently all of a sudden, big dick energy. So you're getting a lot of people that are progressing and peaking later on in life, but they also just don't really have the social skills that they should have adopted when they were younger. So a lot of them don't know how to communicate and be social. And that also, I find that the city does close down around like 10 or 11. The bars definitely shut down at the latest at 2, whereas in New York, they shut down at 4. Last call is 4 o'clock. So because of that, and also another thing, in San Francisco, people are really socially awkward. Like, they have technology and stuff like that, which is great, but then they also just don't know how to communicate with people, and they prefer to just like literally text people and communicate on apps and that sort of thing. Like, for example, I could be waiting in the bus line, or I could be sitting on BART, which is basically like the public transportation, and people will just like not talk to you, no small talk, nothing. Like, how's your day? I lived in San Francisco for 3 years, never knew my neighbors. Like, I kind of knew like one neighbor, but he was cool because he was from England, okay? Like, he wasn't like, I don't know, he was an odd breed. He was great. But like, for instance, when I'm in San Francisco versus New York, when I'm in New York, I know all my neighbors. My neighbors are friends. We literally go out. We went out like during the pandemic, like when we were socially distancing, and we had a like really great time. Like, I honestly feel like my neighbors in New York are like my family away from home, and I feel so connected to them. Like, one even had my house key and would walk my dog. Like, that's how close we were. And in New York, everyone in New York is like a hustler. They want to network. They want to like go out. They want to socialize. Like, it definitely attracts a certain type of person that wants to live in a big city like New York, where everything's open. It used to be open all the time. So that's the difference, is like, hey, if you're looking for a city that's really social, San Francisco might not be it. But, if you're a recovering drug or alcoholic that doesn't want to always be out and living that type of lifestyle, San Francisco is a great place for you, because you literally go to bed at like 7 and 8 p.m. You get up at 6, 7 on a Saturday, and you go hiking. Whereas in New York, you're out until last call, so then you're home at 6 a.m., where you used to be, and then you'd sleep in until brunch, which is like 1 or 2, and rinse and repeat. So that's the difference. Now, I will say, after living in New York for over a year and getting that out of my system, I have definitely found a balance, and I have gone back to living a more intentional, healthy lifestyle where I'm not just out getting ridiculously, wasted and eating artichoke pizza at 2 a.m. That's what it is. So that's basically it. I hope this video is fun. I don't know if it's fun. Anyways, I'm driving right now, and I haven't driven in a really long time, and I'm driving in my brother's car because someone wrecked my car, so I should probably get off filming, but it was really great. Thank you guys for watching. If you like this like vlog style drive with me type of video, then give this video a big thumbs up so I know, and it tells the YouTube algorithm. And if you are someone who wants to join the community and you haven't already, we post videos every Tuesday and Friday, and we would love for you to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. I love you guys so much. I don't want to crash, so I will see you guys later. Bye.